Let's look at the question. A class of 40 students took a mathematics test. The results are presented in the circle graph below. How many students earned a C grade? Our graph tells us 45% of students got a C grade. So I need to figure out what is 45% of 40 students. Given my setup, I'll change 45 to a decimal. It becomes 0.45. Of translates to multiplication, and 40 is 40. 0.45 times 40, and that will give us 18. So we say specifically, 18 students of the 40 got a C grade. Let's look at the question. A class of 40 students took a mathematics test. The results are presented in the circle graph below. How many students earned an A or a B on the test? To determine this, we need to know what percentage are we dealing with. According to our graph, students who earned an A were 15%. Students who earned a B were 30%. So if we're talking about A or B, it means one or both. So that means we're going to add the percentages up to find the total percentage of students who got A's or B's. So we're essentially asking, in this case, 15 plus 30 becomes 45%. 45% of 40 students is what? Is what we need to figure out. So first, our two percentages were 15 and 30%, representing A and B students respectively. I need to find the total amount, so I'll add them to get 45%, which represents students who get an A or a B. So we need to think in terms of the question. 45% of our 40 students is what? I'll change my 45% into a decimal. It becomes 0.45. Of becomes multiplication, and 40 is 40. When I multiply, I'll get 18, or more specifically, 18 students in this class received an A or a B. Let's look at the question where a class of 40 students took a mathematics test. The results printed below. What percent of the students failed the test? And how many failed the test? So we have two questions. Looking at the graph, we can determine what percent of the students failed the test. We use A, B, and C as passing grades, which means F is our failing grade for 10%. So 10% of the students failed the test. To determine how many failed the test, we'll take our percentage and multiply it times 40. We're essentially asking, what is 10% of 40 students? What is 10% of 40 students? Since we're looking at 10% of students failing. So I change 10% into a decimal, 0.1 or 0.10. Of is translated as multiplication. 40 is 40. When I multiply 0.10 times 40, I'll end up with 4. So in this case, 4 students failed the test. Let's look at the question where a class of 40 students took a mathematics test. The results given in the graph. How many more students earned a C than earned a B grade? So if we're going to determine this, we need to figure out individually how many students earned a C and earned a B. Using our graph, we see that 45% of the students got a C on the test. And we see that 30% got a B. So for a C grade, we said that was 45% of the students, and a B grade was 30%. Now keep in mind they're asking for how many students, not what percentage. I'm essentially saying 45% of my total population is what? So as a decimal, I need to change that percentage into a decimal before I multiply. Translates to multiplication. I'm saying what is 45% of 40, meaning what is 0.45 times 40. That's going to be 18. Doing the same thing for my B grades, 30% of 40 translates to 0.3 or 0.30, either one, times 40 students. And when I do that, I end up with 12. So a C translates to 18 students, a B translates to 12 students. The question being, how many more students earn C grades versus B grades? And that would be 18 minus 12 for 6, or specifically 6 students. Let's look at the question where a class of 40 students took a mathematics test. The results presented in the graph. What percent of the entire class passed the test? So I'm considering the entire class, and I'm considering what is a passing grade. In this course, we consider A, B, and C's as passing grades. F, of course, is not. So we should add up all the percentages that consist of a passing grade, and then we'll find out of 40 students, what amount of students does that percentage equate to. So looking at my A, B, and C regions, I have 15, 30, and 45%, which when you add up, we'll get 90%. Again, from 30 plus 15 plus 45. Now I'm saying, what is 90% of my total, which is 40 students? As a decimal, 90% becomes 0.9 or 0.90. I'll translate to multiplication, and 40 is 40. Now multiply 0.9 times 40 to find the total number, and that will be 36, or more specifically, 36 students passed the test.